Okay, everyone, we're going to continue along here in melodic minor. We left off at Lydian dominant last time, which was the fourth mode, and now we're going to go on to the fifth mode, which here I call, so we're still in the parent scale of C melodic minor. I'm calling this Aeolian sharp 3, which I think is actually a terrible, terrible name for this, but it does correspond with the numbering system that we've been using so far. Probably the better name for that is Mixolydian flat 6. I mean, to me, it's, it really, the basic chord here is a dominant chord. And so what we get is we get a G7, and then we get a natural 9, a natural 11, and a flatted 13. So, via definition, that 11th and that flatted 13 are both avoid tones in this one. So, to me, this is not the most useful chord scale. That being said, people play this chord scale a lot. It's actually not a bad chord scale to have in your repertoire. But it's not one we're going to look at in this particular class. So just put it on the back burner. Let's see a couple of the harmonizations of this particular chord. I would put this, if I were just going to harmonize this outright, I would create sort of a modal version of it where I'd have a flat 13 and a natural 5 in there, and then maybe some of the other important notes. So here's a couple examples here. So here's one, sort of the bare bones one. Doesn't really even have the sort of dominant function in there, right? Same thing with this type here. This sort of emphasizes that the third of the chord in this case. Maybe a more complete version might be sort of like a minor major 9 chord with the G in the bass. But once again, these are sort of modal versions of this particular chord scale. We don't see it very often. I guess the thing you will see is a melodic use of it, where, say, we have a G7 and our melody maybe kind of uses that scale. As a matter of fact, talking about Stella by Starlight in the bridge, right? There's an E flat and a D in the melody on that G7. When we play Stella by Starlight later in the semester, we're going to choose actually one of two other scales there. But, you could actually play this scale there, and the melody does sort of derive from that scale. So it's, it's an interesting one, but not one that we're going to be super committed to this semester. Okay. The next two, though, however, are super, super important, and we're going to use these quite a bit. These are going to be our go-to scales for a couple of different chord types. So let's take a look at this one. So the A half diminished scale. So this is mode number 6. And notice I'm not numbering this one. You could call this one the Locrian sharp 2, which some people actually call it that. But, I think maybe just thinking of this as the half diminished scale might be the best way for us to deal with it. Because this is the scale that we're going to use to deal with half diminished chords. So, for the most part, when we get a half diminished chord, we're going to go to this scale. So if you look at the stacked version, it's a really beautiful stacked chord. Half diminished chord for the basic chord, natural 9, natural 11, flat 13, and none of those are avoid tones. So this is one of the reasons why we like to use this one. Now, to be fair, that natural 9 there does have a very distinct sound. Oh, I see on my PowerPoint I have a little holdover from before. That's supposed to be a sharp 9 down there on the bottom. Sharp 9, or excuse me, natural 9 has a very distinct sound. So natural 9 on this particular chord scale. I like this one a lot. So let's look at some harmonizations here and how this might be used. So good old half diminished chord there. Here's a half diminished chord with that natural, that beautiful bright natural 9. Probably more common is that voicing. Now that could come also from Locrian, but half diminished with a natural 11 in it. That's a beautiful, beautiful extension. We could add both those extensions in there. Now, even though the F is, a usable tone in there, we generally don't include that F. Let me put the G down here. Tends to cloud up the voicing a little bit. Now, melodically, we can use it all day. So this, a half diminished chord almost always functions as a 2 in a minor key or a temporary key center. Or, a lot of times we will borrow the 2 from minor to go to a major chord or vice versa. So, sometimes they're interchangeable. That's what the beboppers tended to do a lot, is they would sometimes play half diminished sounds on just the regular 2 minor 7 chords. So this is usually 2 in a minor 2/5. Almost always a predominant, like I said. So the following dominant, usually in a minor 2/5, is usually altered in some way, right? So not later, we're going to talk about that now. So let's take a look at the altered scale. So you've probably heard of the altered scale before. This one's super, super popular scale. But the stacked version's got some problems with it, and we're going to deal with that in a second. But let's look at the scale. So it's the 7th mode of melodic minor. So some people call it a diminished whole tone scale because it starts out like what we're going to call later an auxiliary diminished scale, and then has this sort of whole tone area of it. So starts out like diminished, finishes like whole tone. Some people call it diminished whole tone. Some people call it superlucrine. I like that one. That's kind of a neat name for that one. Some people call it the Pomeroy mode after Herb Pomeroy from Berkeley. Curious thing to call it in the numbering system is Ionian sharp 1. Don't let this confuse you too much, but just quick demo here. So here's that. There's that altered scale, right? If I flat that B and play a B flat, play all the same notes, I get a B flat major scale. Here it goes again. Here's the altered scale. Here's the B flat major scale. So if you took that B flat major scale and sharp the 1, that's what you get. So actually, take all your major scales, sharp the 1 on them, and you know all your altered scales. Now here's the thing. Let's listen. There's the stacked version, right? So in the stacked version, we get a half diminished chord, right, in our left hand, with a flat 9, a flat 11. There's no such thing as a flat 11, right? So what we have to do to this particular chord scale to make it a viable harmonic unit is we have to kind of mess with it a little bit. Kind of like we did with some of the Phrygian chords before. So really, I mean, that flat 11, it's really a major third. So what if we just make it one? So we're going to bring that down to lower octave. I'm going to slide all this down to the lower octave. So here's our root, right? Here was our stacked version. Yuck, right? So, but instead, we're going to take this E flat, bring it down here, and, maybe we'll consider that like a G sharp now. Everything else can go on the top of the scale. Now, it's pretty uncommon to voice an altered chord like this. But if we do an inventory of this chord now, look, we have a B7 over here in the left hand. We have a flat 9, a sharp 9, a sharp 11, and a flat 13. All of the alterations that we can possibly do on a dominant chord. So all of the extensions are altered in every way they can. A 9th can be a flat 9 or a sharp 9. An 11th can be a sharp 11, and a 13 could be a flat 13. So they're altered. This is why it's called altered, right? So, you know, most commonly we'll have maybe one or we'll have two. That's probably my favorite iteration right there, the last one, right? But, you know, you can, if you're clever. There I did a version of this all stacked up in fourths. Actually works pretty nice. So, like, you know, in big band arranging, you might see that voicing happen when there's an altered chord, and it sounds really, really cool. So, this sort of flavor of dominant is called an altered dominant, and it's almost always a 5/7 chord. Okay, almost always a 5/7 chord. So, but if you have any 5/7 chord, for instance, good old 2-5-1 in C major, on the G7, right, even though we're hearing this sort of, you know, I can go ahead and play that altered scale, and guess what? The rhythm section doesn't even have to catch onto it, because this scale has so much oomph to it. Probably heard this before, like that Crimea River type lick. That's really from the altered scale. There's a couple neat resolutions of that. Actually, we'll review our advanced voice leading stuff from Improv 1 again in this class. And some of those alterations are right there in this altered chord, right? All right, so I knew you guys wanted to do some math, so we're going to get ready for some math. But first, let's just review what we got going on here. So the 4 useful modes of melodic minor. We looked at melodic minor, otherwise known as Dorian sharp 7. Great over 1 minor chords, or also we can kind of use it over a Dorian chord with some care. Lydian dominant, which is mode number 4. That's like a Mixolydian with a sharp 4 in it. And remember, there's 4 different functions of a dominant chord that we would like to play that Lydian dominant sound over. Half diminished, which is the 6th mode of melodic minor, otherwise known as Locrian sharp 2. So we're going to use that on half diminished chords. And then we have this altered scale, which is mode number 7. Otherwise known as Ionian sharp 1, which is really confusing, but we tend to use that on 5/7 chords, right? We're going to learn all of these in 12 keys. All right, now it is time for some math. Here's the thing. Melodic minor is really cool because you can learn a lick and take it into all different places. So, like, for instance, if I get a D13 with a sharp 11 in my music, and I'm asked to improvise over that particular chord, so I could analyze that chord right away, and that chord is now telling me that it has that natural 9, natural 13, and sharp 11 in it. So it's telling me that it's D Lydian dominant. So do I play D Lydian dominant, or do I figure out which melodic minor scale will work? So in other words, do I sort of transpose the idea of a Lydian dominant scale to the parent melodic minor scale? And in this case, if I had D13 sharp 11, that's the 4th mode of what melodic minor? Think about that for a second. You have to work backwards. So if you work backwards from the 4th mode, what is D the 4th mode of which melodic minor? Well, it's actually A melodic minor, right? So I could actually think of playing A melodic minor as opposed to playing D Lydian dominant. I don't know. What do you think? So that's known as the parent scale, right? A melodic minor in this case would be the parent scale. Here's the thing. When you learn some licks in this scale, they tend to be portable. And, well, let's do some more math first. So how about C sharp half diminished? So what would be the parent scale? So, I mean, I could just play C sharp half diminished if I know all my if I know all my half diminished chords, or scales, chord scales, that is. Do I just play that scale, or do I work backwards to get the parent scale from that? So if this is the 6th mode, right, I would just work backwards down to what's the parent scale. E melodic minor is the parent scale, right? What about an A7 altered chord? Mode number 7, so I could just go up a half step and find the parent scale, which is B flat melodic minor in this case. So what are the parent scales in this particular chord progression here? D half diminished, G7 altered, and C minor 6. Think about that for a second. So D half diminished, go down a sixth or up a minor third, get F melodic minor. Go up a half step for the G7 altered, you get A flat melodic minor, and then for that one chord, we could just play C melodic minor. Look, the roots on those form an F minor triad. Very interesting. And actually, we're gonna play that in the tune What Is This Thing Called Love? We have a whole bunch of minor 2/5s in there, and so we're gonna use our parent scales and work them around that tune. But here's what I mean about the portability of these licks. So here's a lick. This is actually one of my favorite melodic minor licks. Whoops, try that again. So I threw in the Crimea River lick at the end there, right? This, you may notice that this skips the fourth of the scale, but it's kind of neat because it really emphasizes a lot of the beautiful extensions. So what are the 4 chord types that this lick will work on? So if this is from F melodic minor, right? The 4 chord types would be first F minor, right? When it's a 1 chord. What would be the 4 chord in F melodic minor? That would be B flat 13 with a sharp 11, right? Or B flat Lydian dominant. We'll work over that. Well, here, let's play those. So here's an F minor chord, F minor major 7. Here's a B flat 7 chord. Next one would be the D half diminished chord, 6th mode. And then the last one would be E7 altered. So notice that lick works on all of those different chord types, right? So it's kind of going to be up to you. Are you going to think about the parent melodic minor scale, or are you going to think about the actual scale of the moment? Kind of up to you. By the way, I asked here, what scale degree is the G, right, on each? So on F minor, the G is the 9th. Notice this lick starts on a G, and it starts the next bar on a G. On a B flat 13 with a sharp 11, it's the 13th, right? On the D half diminished, it's the 11th, and on the E7 altered, it's the sharp 9. It's a beautiful extension on all of those chords. So the idea here is that the 9th of your parent melodic minor scale is a beautiful note of whatever chord that you're on. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in our Zoom meetings. Okay, I think that's good for today. We'll see you guys next time.